Hi everyone, welcome to the MrpTech Podcast. This is episode 52. My name is Matt, I am your host, and this is the weekly podcast discussing everyday tech for everyday people. In this week, we got a great show lined up for you today as we mark the 1 year anniversary of this podcast. I can't believe it's been a year already. 52 episodes without a break. We're going to keep on going. And what I thought I'd like to do today is quickly talk about what the last year has sort of meant for me in regards to this podcast. So 1 year ago, starting with episode 1 of this podcast, what I really wanted to do, the secret story behind this podcast, was not really that I wanted to do a technology podcast. The reason why I started doing this actually was because I wanted to become a better public speaker and to become a better storyteller and a person who can better relate to audiences, public audiences. And I thought by putting myself under the microscope, so to speak, and creating a project to work on this specifically, that I could get better slowly and surely over the weeks and months. And so I started with episode 1, just doing a quick podcast on open source and sort of setting the frameworks for this podcast that I wanted to do a technology podcast based off of, anything. I didn't really want to limit myself. And if you look through all of the previous episodes, you can find all the episodes over on the MrpTech Reviews YouTube channel. And many of the original first episodes, just like any other podcast, are not really that great in quality, and was just experimenting with sound quality and such. And I didn't really know what I was doing when it came to this whole podcasting thing. And so, but I did hit a lot of really cool topics looking back now. I talked about, open source video editors. I did some Apple coverage. I talked a lot about Chromebooks. Then I got into the SpaceX thing, and I sort of came back and came back to Linux and talked about a couple of Ubuntu releases, did some Microsoft things when around the time of the Windows 7 upgrade license to Windows 10 deadline approached. And I just kind of bounced around, and it was kind of neat to see all these different projects that I got involved with. And then I really started branching out and, learning how to use Android on PCs and came across projects like Cloud Ready for Chromebooks and such. And looking back now, it really has been a kind of wild roller coaster ride of topics from week to week. And some of these things I knew a little bit about, and some of them I knew nothing about before the project came up on my radar for the podcast, such as going back now to like episode 30, the episode about Hanson Robotics. I had no idea that there was these companies out there that were creating almost lifelike robots at this point in time. And so I was sort of fascinated by all these topics that sort of gave me avenues of discussion here on the podcast. So things like coming across open broadcasting software, which really sort of changed the setup here for this podcast. And I reviewed that on an episode. And from time to time, I went back and maybe clarified a few things that I was talking about. I sort of rehashed Solus and Arch Linux a couple of times and talked about some problems that I had, some issues. But overall, it's been quite fun, really looking towards finding new things to learn about and to present in this podcast in a way that I could get other people informed about. To give you an example of a few different things that I came across this year, the Apple Teacher Program. I wasn't aware of that prior to maybe early November when I came across that, and Apple's program built to help teachers use Apple software in the classroom, like iMovie and GarageBand, those types of products. And I just thought it was a neat program. and hopefully some people found use for it. I got a lot of hits on YouTube for my Apple Teacher review there back in early November. And so it really has been a learning experience for this last year. And again, with the very first premise that I was talking to you all about, that I wanted to become a better public speaker and sort of improve the quality of this podcast as I present it week after week. And I'm hearing a lot of great things, some feedback from all of you on a weekly basis. And I definitely appreciate all of those out there who have contributed to this podcast in ways that I couldn't even imagine people contributing. And things really began to change around episode 33 when this podcast became part of Podnuts. And before that, I sort of didn't know the ins and outs of podcasting very well. There was things behind the scenes that I could have been doing better. And the one person that sort of helped me out with that was Steve McLaughlin. And I definitely got to give him a big thanks right now for helping me out and getting me going and inviting me to join Podnuts, because ever since then, it's been onward and upward, and really appreciate that. So if you haven't already, I will make just a recommendation to go over to Podnuts and check out some of the shows on the Podnuts network. Maybe hit the donation button or give a monthly donation or a single donation to Podnuts for all of their hard work, because not only do they provide great podcasts week after week, but they also help out the new guys who are interested in just learning and getting started. So big thanks to all of them and all of the hosts over at the Podnuts network for all the help that they have given over the last few months. And even since then, there's always new topics to talk about, always fun, exciting things to talk about. And the way that I try to approach this podcast is to keep things positive. You know, we have so much bickering and I don't want to use the word complaining, so much bickering and so much infighting going on in politics and everything else that I think nobody really wants to listen to that. So even if I have some negative things to say, I always try to put it in a positive spin so that, listeners can choose from themselves what they want to do. So, and I think the best thing that comes from that is the community engagement that I have been getting. People sending me links to things like Patio books and other resources that I was not aware of, being sort of relatively new around here. So thanks everybody for all of your support over the last year. It has been a tremendous amount of work, but at the same time, it has been really fun, and it's something that I look forward to week after week. And I sort of branched off over the last year and got involved with some new things and new things that I wanted to try. I got involved with blogging a little bit. I got also involved with live streaming. And you may have noticed that over the last couple of weeks, I have not been on the live stream. There's a couple of reasons for that. And here at my office, I was not in my office the last couple of Fridays. Our school district, our boys and girls basketball teams went to the Final Four of the state championships. The girls lost their game, and the boys actually won their game. And so our school district has been sort of rallying behind the basketball teams here at our school. And so special congratulations to the guys basketball team for winning the state championships. And so there was one week that I wasn't available here because of that. And also the week before, I actually went to a conference that I'd like to talk to you all about right now. Being a part of the technology committee at my district, I went to a conference called ExploreEdu. Now, this is a conference that is put together in a collaboration from Best Buy and Google. And their goal is to encourage use of Google apps for education in school districts. And Best Buy is sort of the facilitator, and Google is trying to convince school districts why they should be using G Suite compared to everything else. And there is a school district in our area that is basically a model school for Google and for Best Buy. And they have had so much tremendous amounts of success implementing Chromebooks in their district that school districts from all over our state have come to these ExploreEdu events to see what they're doing right, to see what they're doing wrong. And this event that I went to was much larger than a similar event I went to in a previous year. And in this case, there was actually representatives of Google and Best Buy there. And this event was crazy amounts of fun. You walk into the area where there was presenting going on, and Google had brought all sorts of neat things that you wouldn't expect to see at a school conference. They had inflatable decorations all around for this ExploreEdu event. Made you really feel like you were part of an event rather than just a conference. And the school district sort of took the center stage, and they opened it up to Q&A for several hours, basically talking about what they did right implementing Chromebooks, what they did wrong. And they really just open and upfront about all of their experiences using Chromebooks in an educational setting. And it was kind of refreshing to be there and to see that they were willing to share not only things that worked, but also the things that didn't work for them, and the trials and tribulations that they had implementing this new technology in their district. And what was really cool about the conference is during this Q&A session, Google had set up their own network where as you walked in the door, you were given a Chromebook to use for the day. And you were also given a gift package that we were sort of unaware what was inside of as we sat down. So they built their own network for ExploreEdu so that all the Chromebooks had internet access. You could experiment with the Chromebooks, and I was pretty familiar with Chromebooks, so I didn't really spend all that much time. But what I found really interesting is that during this conference, as these school officials were on stage, you could actually ask questions to the Google reps through your Chromebook to not interrupt the flow of the conference. So anybody that had a question, they would type it in their Chromebook, and the Google reps would answer it within a few minutes and not interrupt the conversations that were happening between audience and the stage. So you didn't have to feel like you were interrupting something. You could just type in your question and you'd be good to go, and you get your answer. And I found that extremely useful as someone who's going to be doing this soon in their school district, having some ideas that I didn't really feel like everybody else wanted me to ask publicly. But again, just really a neat thing. Another thing that we got to try is Google had provided Google Glasses to everyone, provided through Best Buy. So they were sort of Best Buy themed, Google Cardboard, not Google Glasses, Google Cardboard. So it was kind of cool to check out the virtual reality setup and the implements or things that you can use in your classroom. We took a look at some of the Great Barrier Reef sort of immersive views and how you can use this in a classroom and how you can direct the focus of an entire class using Google Cardboard to one specific spot. And it was a really neat thing. Google had provided a bunch of, I don't know if they were LG or Motorola phones. They were really inexpensive that you could just try for a few minutes this virtual reality thing. And as I were doing that, I took out my iPhone and I downloaded a few virtual reality apps just for fun. And I would definitely not recommend trying a virtual reality roller coaster app just after eating lunch. That's don't do that if you get a little motion sick. So, but I thought it was a neat little event that they were nice enough to provide Google Cardboard for everybody. And this ExploreEdu thing is basically It's designed to give school administrators and technologists new tools to create the classroom of the future, basically. And it's really about building relationships with partners and other people in your area that are interested in doing the same thing. So people that would really be interested in this would be administrators, technology directors, curriculum creators, or somebody who is involved with Google certified training like I am. And these educational products, they basically just teach you what you need to do. And the coolest part was to see how excited the students were when we walked around the building. The last time that I tried to do this, the internet actually had gone out, and it wasn't a really great example of how Chromebooks were being used in the classrooms. And this time we were actually able to go around and meet some of the students, and the students were really excited to talk about all of this stuff. And they talked about the apps that they use and things that they're doing in the classroom. And it was really refreshing to see how excited they were to just talk to somebody about how much this has changed their lives. So it's pretty awesome. And what I will do is I will put the ExploreEdu link in the show notes if you're interested in checking that out. What I would have really liked to have seen from the conference, they basically told us that this school district knew so much about what they were doing that they'd sort of just let them take control and take the reins from everything. Best Buy did come up and talk briefly about the Google Cardboard, but I really would have liked to hear more from Google and Best Buy during this whole process. It was about a day-long conference, but it was an excellent conference, and I was certainly glad that I attended it. So that's why there was no live stream 2 weeks ago. I'm gonna get back into the live streaming thing this week. But in the meantime, as I'm getting geared up for this podcast today, just for those who are interested, I'm seeing now that today Apple released an iPhone 7 in product red. And in the past, this usually means that Apple will be donating money towards HIV research and AIDS prevention. And that's really cool that they're using it on an iPhone, being a $600 device. You know, these iPhones, that whatever percentage it is that the money is taken from, it's going to be probably a pretty hefty chunk of change for HIV research and AIDS. So that's really cool that this new iPhone 7 in product red has come out just this morning as of March 21st. And also a brand new old iPad has been released. Basically what they've done is they've given the iPad Air 2 a spec bump, and instead of using the A8 chip, they're using the A9 chip, and increase the brightness of the display on the iPad Air 2 and drop the price down to starting at $329. So they're trying to be a little bit more competitive with their pricing of their tablets, which I think is pretty awesome. Does that make me want to go buy an iPad Air 2 at this point? Probably not likely. But it does give people an option, and especially with this new spec bump, with the new processor in it, makes it a good device for people who don't want to spend the money on the new iPad Pros. I was expecting some new iterations of the iPad Pros themselves, but apparently that hasn't happened yet. That doesn't mean that it won't be coming soon. Maybe now that this has happened, maybe there'll be an event in April or an event in June where these new devices are released and the next generation iPads come out. Not sure about that. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. The iPad that did come out today is available in 32 gigs and 128. It's the 9.7 inch iPad Air 2, basically just with a spec bump, and still has the Retina display and still has the fingerprint reader built into it. So those of you who might want a iPad without the iPad Pro price, now you have an option available to you starting at $329, and I believe it's going to be available on March 24th, both the iPhone 7 product red and iPad 9.7 inch spec bumped iPad Air 2 basically. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this podcast and We will continue next week with a new topic. I hope you all subscribe to our RSS feeds and check out the MRP Tech Reviews YouTube channel. That's where all the good stuff is going. And thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.